This episode of the Say Report features the usage of language some listeners may find offensive. In no way does the Say Report endorse the use of this language, but we found its use necessary in context. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Face or vase, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me in stunned optical illusion silence, my host companion, Sejohn Sarowick.
Please tell me that you forget to hit record again after all of the times that you've done that in the past.
Oh no, that's real. This is real. This is happening.
Oh, great. Good. Excellent.
Why? You're lucky.
No.
I had licorice like 4 minutes ago, and I was chewing it.
You're on a licorice high. I get it.
Dude,
it now.
I'm on a licorice high. I finally figured out this episode is going to be an episode that I'm proud of already.
Oh.
But you need to stop the presses because I found a life hack that is going to change the world. And I'm not being hyperbolic.
Wow. Okay. All right. Yeah. Let's do this.
All right. So everybody already knows about the life hack about not asking for no drink in your soda from like a McDonald's, or not putting drink in your fountain beverage. I mean, ice in your fountain beverage.
I was gonna say, what is the no drink in your beverage life hack?
Okay. Right. Everybody knows that because it waters down the soda and it takes up precious room. They put so much ice in there because they don't want to give you syrup mixed with water.
Which also already cost them pennies on the dollar for what you're paying for it.
Right, exactly. Yes. Right? You get it. You understand. So I have lately been on a bit of a cold brew coffee kick. Sejohn can attest to this because I lamented the fact that all the coffee shops around me, Dunkin' Donuts...
I legitimately can only drink cold brew. Like my system can only stand cold brew anymore. Well, that's the point I'm at in my life.
But do you get ice in your cold brew coffee?
Well, yes.
Okay, Sejohn, I'm gonna blow your mind. Get it without the ice. It comes out cold, just like your fountain drinks at McDonald's. And it's delicious. And it doesn't get watered down. It's delicious. That's what I'm drinking right now. And I don't know if that's why I'm amped up or if I'm amped up because of what this episode is going to be. But there's it. We're starting the episode with a life hack, and that is if you're getting a cold brew coffee, don't get ice in there. Yeah. It's just an excuse for them to give you less coffee.
I wasn't ready for this, so I got ice in my drink. Well, I didn't know we were going to start right away.
It's okay that you have ice in your drink. Oh, you wanted to go get a drink. That's fine. I'm going to talk for a bit. So, Sejohn, feel free to go get a drink while I talk.
I got a drink. It's just got ice in it.
Oh, it's fine.
That we would have a couple of minutes and it would kind of
melt down into up water. I mean, that's the thing. Right there is the inherent problem with not getting ice in your drink. There is something super refreshing about going back to the drink you finished like an hour ago, and then suddenly there's more liquid in there.
Another drink. It's a whole other drink.
I know. But the reason why it's a whole other drink is just because of how much ice they put in there. like it's simultaneously the problem and the only reason for ice in drinks. But with coffee, you don't get ice in your hot coffee because you want to drink it hot. Why are you going to get ice in your cold brew coffee?
That logic doesn't hold up, but okay.
This is what I thought today, and I tried it, and it's magnificent. And welcome to the Say Report. Again, I'm Devon Decker. He's Sejohn Sarowick. And I am excited because as much as I love Brendan Frasier History Month, as much as it is something that I look forward to the other 11 months of the year, Brendan Frasier History Month changes this podcast. Because we have to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, the Brenmaster, Brendan Frasier.
Yes, to talk about Brendan Frasier, yes.
We have to talk about Brendan. But unfortunately, because we're doing that, everything that Sejohn and I do kind of gets put on a back burner.
Yeah.
Now, I'm fine with that. I'm completely fine with that. But this episode is the Ketchup Report. And I know some people pronounce it Catsup, but...
The Catsup Report. There you go.
We're going to catch up on all the cool stuff that happened to us over May. I have a thesis to share. I mean, that's from this past weekend, but, like, the other stuff happened besides Brendan Frasier's glory being blessed upon us.
Yeah, let me throw a couple of simple ones out there just to get them out of the way, and then we can get into some of the deeper stuff that you get going on.
Go.
Yeah, so we've been playing a lot of Borderlands. That's something that's happening, but I think we're probably going to talk more about that probably later on once Borderlands 3 becomes more of a thing. You know, and there's definitely stuff to talk about there. I don't know. You listen to Junior more often than I do. Has Zach been mentioning or Dale been mentioning any of their experiences with Borderlands? Because I know the two of them have been deep into other things with Borderlands besides what they've been doing with us.
Yeah, Zach is remembering just how much of the original Borderlands is one map, different angles.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
But really, what Junior has been preparing for is this is their Brendan Frasier History Month. It's E3 season.
Oh yeah. E3. That's the other thing that we've been kind of putting off is there's been a lot of pre E3. We're not going to E3, but here's our E3 announcements. Yeah, pre-3, which has essentially become its own thing now. Pre-3 is people being like, we're too cool for E3, but here's all this shit around. Oddly, 2 or 3 weeks before E3.
Or let's talk about Google announced today. Don't bother waiting for E3. The first Stavia upload begins on 8 p.m. on 6/6.
Yeah.
So like I'm just like, oh, you guys are jerks, Google.
Yeah. E3 doing their whole thing. By the way, Zach ran into TK Baja again. Just wanna throw that out there. And he'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, he won't know exactly what I'm talking about, but he'll know why that's a joy.
I mean, I know who TK Baja is. I'm proud of myself for getting that reference. Because, as you said, we've been playing some Borderlands, and if you thought I didn't care about the story of Destiny, just wait until the story is only there in little portable MP3 players you can choose to pick up or not.
That's not entirely true, but we'll get into that, like I said, when we get more into Borderlands stuff.
I think once we finish Borderlands 2, you can watch us play 9 hours of it at twitch.tv/Siege vs. the World 22.
Also, what a fool you are for thinking we're ever going to get to the end of Borderlands 2, because I actually took a dip into some of the DLC today, on top of the fact that you can also replay in basically New Game Plus mode afterwards. There is no end to Borderlands 2.
Okay, but I mean, the thing where the trophy says, complete the game.
Yeah, I actually even questioned that. But the other thing is, let's see, what else has gone on over the last month? I dipped into the first episode of Good Omens. Pratchett and Gaiman's classic, and that Gaiman rewrote for television or Amazon streaming. I mean, television.
It's going to be eligible for Emmys, so
yeah,
television is fine.
Yeah, dipped into that, fell in love with it, but I want to finish it before I go too balls to the wall on it. But I highly recommend it off of just the first episode.
I want to watch the crap out of it. I just want to watch all of it before I talk about it.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing to keep in mind is that the stuff that you really felt was really odd with Pratchett's writing is present in the show, obviously. I mean, he helped write the original source material, but what Gaiman does with it is he turns it into a very necessary part of the whole that I'm interested to hear how you feel about it performed versus on the page. But yeah.
I mean, I look at so I'm a huge fan of the Douglas Adams Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy stuff. So recommended to me by the library in its infinite library wisdom back in 2004. So I this is like pre-future. This is 15 years ago. And the library's just like, hey, we noticed you like Douglas Adams. Maybe you'll like this. And it just spit out Good Omens into my hand. So I read it, right, because I was at college. And I did a lot of reading in college. Never what was necessary for my courses, right? There's the secret of my success. But I read a lot because I had a desk. I like reading while sitting up, hunched over the book.
Okay.
I feel like it's difficult to do that in like a at-home setting or a recreational setting. Am I crazy? I mean, like...
Yeah, no, there's not many cases in which you were forced to basically be alone in a room with a book other than college.
Yeah, so, I mean, I read through Good Omens. I mean, it's 15 years ago. It's not like me going back to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy once a year. Or MASH. I read the book MASH once a year because of course I do. That makes sense that I do that.
How do you feel? I feel like you just grew flannel as you said that statement.
What do you mean?
Nothing. I read MASH before it was a TV series. It's fine. It's cool.
I mean, my father read MASH before it was a TV series. Does that give me the same hipster credibility? My father knew about it before it was cool.
So now I want to see him in craft beers and overalls the next time I'm
Oh, he hates craft beers. It does not. They do not agree with his system. Much like anything but cold brew does not agree with yours. So I'm super excited to watch it because it's something that like I have a vague idea of what's happening because I read it years and years ago. But also Michael Sheen acting again makes me super happy.
Yeah. Well, it's a hell of a thing for him to come back on, and he does a fabulous job.
Yeah.
Again, I've only watched the first episode, but I fell in love pretty much instantly. It's a pretty magical show.
Yeah.
What else has been going on this past month? There's been
life was like a hurricane here in the world because Disney was like, oh yeah, we haven't showed a DuckTales in 6 months. How about we give you 19 episodes of DuckTales?
Man.
Woo!
So I've only watched up to, I think, the episode where, what's his name? Hercules there.
Storcules?
Storcules moves in with Donald. I think that's all I've watched.
So so you haven't seen any of the new stuff. So I can't even talk about what happens in the new stuff because it's pretty huge. Because episode 7, which you've just admitted you haven't seen, kicks off something incredible that like comes to a head in episode 12. And then 4 episodes more down the line, Darkwing Duck is there. I'm not ruining that for you. I haven't seen it either. It's called Return of the Duck Knight.
And he is he's a little older.
And he is prominently displayed in all the marketing. I hate that I still have not seen that episode. Like, hate is the word that I'm going to use. So I'm super excited to get there. And I actually need to get there before Saturday of this week because I'm not waiting another week. And I have to watch the Darkwing Duck episode with my mother. Like, there's no way I can watch it without her. Because it was like a show we watched together. Also, Big Bang Theory ended. These are just like the short stuff, right?
Yeah.
The Big Bang Theory final episode was not very good, in the opinion of Devin Decker. But mostly because
Big Bang Theory was not very good, it turns out, after all these
years.
It
turns, yes, exactly. But, we watched it in the beginning, and I watched it through most of it. I don't think I've seen any of Season 7, except for the episode where, what's her name? Not Bernadette. Amy Farrah Fowler ruins Raiders of the Lost Ark for them. And the world collectively, and I mean the world collectively, meaning outside of the microcosm that I feel like you and I live in.
Yep.
That I don't want to give a name. Like, it's a conversation that I know we had definitely had, but that episode where Amy Farrah Fowler's like, yeah, everything happens in this movie whether or not Indiana Jones is there or not.
I feel like that's more than just our microcosm has had that conversation.
Right,
I feel like that's one of the biggest, like...
No, I understand that, but it was the only reason I saw that episode. Like, I did not watch any of Season 7, and then I was just, like, hanging out, and people who are not us, and not, like, similar to us, were talking about how an episode of The Big Bang Theory ruined Raiders of the Lost Ark for them. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to see it, right? Because if a regular person can have this movie ruined for them, I can only imagine what they did. And they just did the whole thing that, like, I was talking about with friends in college about how, yeah, he's kind of inconsequential.
I feel like Kevin Smith made that comment, or somebody somewhere that we were following 10 years ago made that comment, and we were just like, shit, you're right. And, like, we've had that conversation a million times since.
Yeah. It was just really weird to see it come up in that. Like, that was the time where I'm like, oh, I understand where people are like, this is just mining nerd culture.
To see them steal a joke, I don't
Yeah.
think it's that weird. But
Well,
yeah.
no. I mean, like, but to have it affect those people the way that it did, whatever. The fact of the matter is,
For sure.
the finale episode of The Big Bang Theory exemplified every problem that I have with the show, in that they're mean. Like, they were so mean in the finale to one another. And like, that's not what I want in a finale of a TV show. I'm gonna just be honest with you. But the saving grace was the young Sheldon that aired immediately following the finale of The Big Bang Theory was him trying to throw a party to listen to the Nobel Prize announcements, which would be at 5 a.m. in Texas where he lives.
Nice.
And no one shows up for that moment. And he just, like, it breaks him as a 9-year-old that, like, he feels so alone that he has no one there to share it with. And they do this wonderful montage showing the other members of the Big Bang Theory cast as kids and what they were doing at that time. And Leonard was listening to the announcement. And, like, Penny was just sprawled out in her bed and all this other stuff. So, yeah, like, that felt like a more fitting finale to The Big Bang Theory than the actual finale episode of The Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, that's weird.
It, like, because I was, like, not happy with The Big Bang Theory finale, and then I watched the Young Sheldon thing. It, like, got me down that I'm like, I don't want to watch Young Sheldon. I'll wait a week. And I watched it a week later, and I'm like, oh, I bet if I had, like, done these two together, I wouldn't have had like a sad week.
I have to say that the thing that's upsetting me the most right now is you telling me that there's only 7 seasons of Big Bang Theory, because at this point in my life,
12 seasons. No, I skipped the 7th season. I didn't watch a single episode. Like, collectively, I mean, that's the show. Television's a religion of the Deckers, right? I'm not ashamed to admit that at all, because we've been watching James's historic run on Jeopardy as a family, which is kind of nice.
You are a family that straight up celebrates Festivus unironically.
Yeah, I know that. I'm
right. But for the audience, so that there's a literal Festivus pole in the house.
I know, and it's right, and I keep it next to the podcast station when the feats of strength, when I lose, when I get pinned, it comes downstairs until the next Festivus proper. So I'm looking at it right now because I got pinned. I'm not ashamed to admit it. But yeah, so we've been watching it, and there was an episode about TV, and that was the first time that it was a race to see which one of the 4 of us could get their answer out first, and thus get Decker credit for it.
Decker credits. Can I turn those in at the prize counter? What do I get?
You get a Tootsie Roll.
All right.
And it's like 50,000 Decker credits for Tootsie Roll.
It's also 10 years old, so it's basically a rock at this point.
Yeah, you get a chocolate rock. But it's like, it's really one of those things that is. And collectively, after the 6th season of The Big Bang Theory, we sat down and we're like, yeah, I think we're done with this. I think that this has gone its course and no more. And we just didn't watch any of the 7th season. And then we together watched that episode of where Amy ruins Indiana Jones. And then we're like, we got to just keep watching it, right? And we had convinced ourselves that the 9th season was the last season for some reason. And here we are 3 years later. Like, if you listen to early episodes of the Say Report, you hear me say, yeah, and this is the last season of The Big Bang Theory, so I'm kind of excited. But I think one of the reasons why we thought that is the family has watched a lot of last seasons of television. We have seen a lot of them. And one of the big things that a finale season of television does is bring back old characters to, like, give them their final send-off.
Yeah.
And The Big Bang Theory basically started doing that in season 9.
Well, was it one of those cases? I feel like Big Bang Theory is one of those ones where they were always ready for it to be the last season.
I think so as well. Well, I think the problem is they kept going to the people and being like, we really want to do another season. Here's how much we'll pay you, expecting them to have any scruples like Seinfeld had, or like a Sam, which his real name is Ted Danson, like saying like, no, it's kind of come to an end. I want to do other stuff, and the people of the Big Bang Theory are like, no, yeah, we'll take that. We want to make sure that the other people who are now main cast members make the same amount of money as us, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, it's a show that it affected culture in a way that I'm not even prepared to accept. Like 10 years from now, we'll look back on it and be like, man, Big Bang Theory really set the stage for this. And I don't love that. But it is something that I'm going to have to come to terms with over the years. And I think that the benefit of me not watching that show has allowed me to accept that in a way where if I had been consuming that show, I think I would have been upset. Because I feel the opposite way. I'm super pissed at a show like How I Met Your Mother because I did watch it all the way through and I was with it every step of the way. And I'm really pissed at the fact that that really did kind of set the stage for what the sitcom was going to be in the future, and I feel like maybe if I had not actually been a consumer of How I Met Your Mother, that maybe I'd feel a little bit better about the fact that culture kind of just came around it. But like being in the midst of it, being in the shit with it, I feel really like I'm mad. I guess at myself. I'm mad. I'm mad at the world. I'm mad at myself for being taken by a show like that in retrospect, in a way that I wish that in a way that I probably would be like you are about Big Bang Theory, but honestly, I have no opinion about it because I've stayed so far away from it over the years.
Well, I mean, I want to specify that about Big Bang Theory. I don't feel the way you feel about How I Met Your Mother. Okay. It's a different thing because I felt the same way about How I Met Your Mother, except the fact that the family sat down after the season 8 finale and were like, we're not doing any more of this. Like, It's not worth it. And then it's like, well, it's just one more season, right? They have confirmed it's the last season. We'll drop in every now and then. And it's one of those things where I was so upset with what that show did. I can fully admit that did not work for me in any way, shape, or form. But I had kind of guarded myself a little bit against it by sitting down and saying, I'm watching this out of weird obligation, not out of desire.
Like, and is that not how you felt with Big Bang Theory?
And but that's what I'm saying is Big Bang Theory. It was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, really, because that's how TV seasons work. That I was like, no, I'm done with this. I'm completely done with it. If I can watch an episode, I'll watch it, but it's no longer required viewing, which is actually how I felt during the first season. Like, I was so against it when it came out, where I'm like, I'm not interested in a show like this. And then I saw the episode where Sheldon has to lie about something, like it's episode 16, and they did a joke of them all going to bed and forgetting about Raj because he couldn't talk at the time.
Right.
And that joke worked for me on such a level that I went out and bought the DVD, I think with you, at the North Kingston Walmart. So, I bought it. And and was just like...
Definitely with me then.
Yeah, no, that's I wunk. You heard the wink. And then, like, just devoured it. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm going to watch this show. Like, I'm going to watch it weekly. And then 6 later, So then I had just realized, like, taking that year off from the Big Bang Theory, how mean the show was. And just like, that's not really what this show should be about. Like, at all. Like, I don't get the meanness.
And I feel like that's a Chuck Lorre thing in retrospect. Like, looking at a bunch of his shows now that we have a handful of them, 2.5 Men. I mean, even what's the one on Netflix there about the Disjointed, the one about the weed store. Like, in retrospect, it's this weird thing where it's masquerading as this show of acceptance, so like with Big Bang Theory, the idea of the acceptance of nerd culture and the fact that this is here to stay, so we need to learn about these people. But it's looking at it through a lens of somebody from outside that still doesn't quite get that culture. And so like there's such an attitude applied to it that it just feels like you're saying, like mean. It feels rude. It feels unfair, you know. And then the same can be said of Disjointed in a lot of ways of the way that it looks at weed culture. There's a lot going on in that show that's really cool because like, hey, mainstream like weed culture is like what we've been dying for. But the way that it approaches a lot of those characters is really mean.
Yeah, stereotypy.
Hmm. Well, it's even beyond stereotypes. It's taken to a point where it's like, hey, you didn't even know this about weed culture, but look at this terrible thing that they do. Or with Big Bang Theory, like, hey, you didn't even know that nerds had this kind of lifestyle, but look at what they do in this lifestyle, and look at how terrible it is. And it's like you're not giving the proper context for this at all.
Right. And that's interesting because I'd like to bring up the show on CBS that I think is doing it right. I'm going to just talk about that. A couple of weeks ago, I shared a post on Facebook about, share if you support polyamory and the poly lifestyle. And I do. Even though it's not what I live, I don't even know what I live. I'm going to just admit that. I definitely support it because I have so many people in my life who that's how they live and they are finding happiness. Right?
Right. Yeah. So what is the show?
So I shared it. So I'm gonna get to it. And the weird thing about it is that Facebook is such a fucking monster that for like a week after me sharing that, I got a bunch of targeted ads that were clearly just because I shared that one thing. And I'm just like, oh, like this feels awkward.
Thanks, computer overlords. Thank you.
But Dale had been away when I did that. Dale went on vacation this month. And when she came back, she saw it and she shared it as well for the exact same reason. And I'm like, I just want to give you a heads up that you shared that. Facebook's going to freak out and you're going to get some weird targeted marketing. Like, don't be bothered by that. And for the love of God, don't click on any of it. Like it was like this warning thing, and I was in the car with my mother and father while they said it, and they're like, wait, what is this? Can you explain it? And I tried to explain it like in a way that they would get it like as thoroughly as they needed to. Like just saying the stuff, some of the stuff I was unable to cut through to make it so they could understand. And then Dale quite simply said, SWAT? And my parents go, yeah. And they're like, you know how Chris is in a relationship with a male and a female together? They're all in a relationship together. That's what we're talking about. And they're like, oh, okay. And it made me realize that, like, even though CBS has some shows that are awful, SWAT is killing it in the realm of, like, representation and like sharing knowledge and all of these other things. And because I watched it after that conversation, and every episode of SWAT I watched, I'm just like, this is awesome. Like this is exactly the type of show that we need.
Yeah, I think part of that comes down to the fact that Chuck Lorre and his team that work on their shows, right? Like if you look back to the stuff that they really kind of started on, like look back at Roseanne, look back at that era of television, and they were the progressives. And what we've done is we've just come around full circle to the point where this happens with all progressives. Eventually, you become the conservative. Like it's the snake eating itself that is progressivism. At some point, you become the evil empire, right? And I think that's all that we're seeing with Chuck Lorre is we've hit a point where he is slowly starting to turn into that guy that like okay, like yeah, 15 years ago this was a progressive idea, but now we've hit a point where, or looking at something like Big Bang Theory, maybe even something more like 20 years ago, hit that Big Bang Theory would have been much more progressive than it really was, right? But I mean, look at what happened with Roseanne when they brought that back on ABC. We hit a point where it was just like, oh right, like her whole attitude of like, I don't get it, I don't understand it, but I guess I have to accept it. That was great in the early 90s, but like now we've hit a point where like, hey, if you're going to be shitty about this, even if you're pretending to accept it, we don't want it. Like
right. And I feel like I always bring it up when we bring up Roseanne, which come to find out, I read a beautiful article that one of the reasons why Home Improvement and Roseanne feel like similar shows, same showrunner. Mm-hmm. Like 100%, like I didn't realize that the guy who was producing Roseanne was the guy who did Home Improvement. But Last Man Standing, you want to talk about a show that, like, I know that there are conservative ideals in the background that are that are still problematic. I know that Tim Allen is a whole like can of worms I shouldn't even go near with a 25.5-foot pole. I get that. But watching the show, like, you want to talk about stoner culture being represented fairly? Like, his son-in-law owns a marijuana shop because they live in Colorado.
Yeah.
They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to bring that in.
Yeah, of course. And the thing about Last Man Standing that I'll always stand by, I mean, go back to my days on fucking Super Kenshi, talking about when that show really kind of first started taking off. Like, the funny thing about that show is the joke is that he's the conservative, nobody else is. Whereas, like, with Roseanne, if you go back to that old episodes of that show, you realize that the conservative aspect is overwhelming compared to the free thinker, right? Mm-hmm. Versus a show like Married with Children, where the only conservative on that show really is Ed O'Neill, and then everybody else around him is moving forward, but he's stuck in his old ways. And which is why those two shows kind of fought the way that they did in the 90s for that kind of audience, like, sweet spot, because they both were hitting the same audiences, but they were hitting them from a show like Roseanne, where, like, you had her and Dan, right? Wasn't that John Goodman's name?
Was John Goodman's character.
Yeah, like where her and her husband were really kind of this conservative couple that were dealing with the fact that their kids were more progressive than them and dealing with it in great ways. Like, they were growing and progressing as the show went on. Whereas, like, Married with the Children, everyone around him is just like dragging him into the future, right? Which is much funnier to me. I you know, like, say what you will about that show. I don't know what kind of audience that show still has, but like the joke to me of the progressive family dragging the conservative father along, a la Last Man Standing, is much more interesting and much more easy for me to accept as a show.
Right. I don't disagree. And let's also talk about the fact of, like, the snake eating itself. Family Ties existed in a world where every show was a conservative being dragged along by their progressive family, to the fact that Alex Keaton lived in a Democratic family and his only method of rebellion was to be a Republican.
Right.
Like, that's the central focus of that show.
And so it's funny that you bring up old shows like that, because I think it's a great time to pivot to you watching All in the Family, The Redux.
Oh my God, that's exactly where I was going. I love you. It needs to be said.
Hey,
You're
bud.
drinking a drink. But I have to say I love you, because that's exactly the segue I was working towards. Was live in front of a studio audience, All in the Family and the Jeffersons. And, oh boy, is that something that happened last month that I thought of going up to the date. Like, I thought of the day before it happened, and then it happened and I didn't watch it. And then the day after it happened, I thought about it too, because a lot of people had a lot of things to say about it. And yet, in all of the, like, milieu of people discussing it, no one discussed what is the biggest fucking problem with that project. Oh, I'm on the soapbox now. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. They have Norman Lear there, and he's talking about how the reason why we're doing this is I want to show that the things that were happening back then on television are still relevant today. It's something that we talk about a lot when we watch an older movie or something older and say, it's really weird that in 2004, we already were having this discussion. And it's 2019, and it feels like we've made no progress towards doing anything about it in 15 years. Mm-hmm. And there was this really weird moment. Okay, there's a lot of problems with it. Problem one is, I love Woody Harrelson. I absolutely do love Woody Harrelson.
For sure.
I don't think he did a great Archie Bunker. I'm going to be honest with you. I like Jamie Foxx. I think he's a good actor as well. I don't think he did a good George Jefferson. I think it was like bordering on minstrelsy for me, watching him act like George Jefferson.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so full disclosure, like, Devin watched it in its entirety. I haven't seen a stitch of it. Like,
okay,
like,
yeah, that's what I was about to ask you. Have you seen it?
No, we've seen it, and it's in our Hulu queue, but honestly, after your reaction to it, I haven't had much of a desire to pop it on just yet.
Right, and that's fine. But every review that I read of it raved about how good Woody Harrelson and Jamie Foxx were. And I didn't see it. Honestly, I didn't see it. The people that I want to talk about who did an amazing job during this show is Wanda Sykes and Marissa Tomei playing Edith and like Ellie Kemper playing Gloria. Like all these people, and they have this moment that happens in the episode of All in the Family that is the backdoor pilot for the Jeffersons, where they talk about how, you know, like women are getting jobs now and all of this stuff. And it came across as this like big like woman power moment, and they all cheered in the audience, but also looking back at what that was at the time, that was also probably sort of making fun of that idea in a way that was a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because when you're talking about a comedy show, talking about these big political ideas, it's hard to know when they're satirizing these ideas. That's the word.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I like how you said it, though. I know how to spell it based on your original pronunciation.
Right. But you know, you never know when they're making fun of it or when they're supporting it, right? And a good writer will make sure that you do know, and what you're seeing is an indication of just a moment of just like, I don't know if the writing is up to snuff with the actual political idea that they're writing about, right? And so for sure, yeah.
Yeah, it was just one of those weird things. And like that was one of those moments where I'm just like, what is happening? Like this just feels awkward. And also knowing that like nobody was really celebrating what Marissa Tomei and Wanda Sykes had done also seemed odd, because like Marissa Tomei, it felt like she embodied the character in a way that like Woody Harrelson just didn't. He made Archie Bunker his own, which is a fine like way to approach a character, but it didn't seem like it was in the spirit of what they were going for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But the big thing and the big problem, and I'm going to talk about it, I you know, screw the optics and whatever it is you have Norman Lear at the beginning of the episode talking about how these are going to be presented exactly as they were written. No changes have been made to what you are about to see. This is literally something that was on TV 50 years ago. You know, 40 years ago, right? Whatever. The 70s, right? I think both of them were in the 70s.
Yeah, and so they have Norman Lear contextualize what you're about to watch.
Yeah, and he wants you to understand that like these problems still exist, exactly what like we try to talk about. So don't think that we modified it like, oh, it's going to be fun to modify it and we talk about Trump, and it's like, no, that's not what this is.
But also, it's a quick way to say, hey, you're going to hear some things that might be upsetting to you, but keep in mind that this is exactly as it was 50 years ago. Like,
that's real
as a
cool that you cut to the quick of you're going to hear some things that might be upsetting to you, because it turns out you're fucking not. And that is why I'm on the soapbox, and that is why I'm angry. And I'm sorry, I don't like to get angry. I don't like to be negative on this show, but it made me really angry because in the pilot episode of The Jeffersons, George Jefferson is talking to the biracial couple that lives in the building who they are friends with. Mm-hmm. And he says, you know, you guys can't fight. They're like, we never fight. Like, our relationship is not based on fights. And he goes, you can't fight because if you get into a fight, your white husband is going to call you a nigger. And that's what was said on TV. That is what George Jefferson said on TV in the 70s. And I said it here. All right, and if that offends you, I'm very sorry. But, like, I am quoting something, and that's what Norman Lear wanted to say, and that's why he contextualized it. But ABC bleeped it when George Jefferson said it in the live, in front of a studio audience, All in the Family. So you didn't hear it said. So, like, the shock and the fact that, like, this is something that was said back then, it didn't happen. And then it happened again, and it was bleeped again. And it just felt like, then what is the point of this? What is the point of this? If Norman Lear is going to contextualize it, everything you're going to hear is exactly as it was written at the time, and then you're going to censor it because it's 2019. I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry. And then I see
wallow in that for a second.
I know.
It's there. But like,
and then I see articles where like Kerry Washington, who was the other actor who used the word during the broadcast and what bleeped out, like saying like celebrating the way that they handled the sensitive subject of using that word. And it's like, but that's not what this was supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that if you want to talk about it in terms of optics and in terms of like audience reception, right? Like, and you want to step back and from that word and its use back in the 70s versus 2019, I think the idea of a bleep, right? Like that's where you have to focus. And the idea being that live studio audience heard it, they definitely said it. It was a decision on the part of the larger company for you to not hear it. It's the same way with when they like bleep stuff on SNL when they're direct quotes from politicians like Trump. Um, and it's that idea that like the larger company makes that decision. This was not a decision made by the artist. It was not a decision made in the moment. It was not a decision made by the character, right? Like nobody bleeps themselves in real life. So that idea that like the idea of the bleep becomes this thing that is like removed from the context of the story, where like yeah you hear it, but you also there's more, there's something about that, there is something to that. Now how you react to that and how you take that in and how you feel about that, that's entirely up to you as a viewer, right? And I think it's really interesting because it essentially takes the authority out of the hands of the person that says it and puts it firmly in the hands of the viewer. Because honestly, I don't even know if I would have noticed.
I know, and that's another thing that what's crazy is that it's not like it's bleeped universally. If you see the first episode of The Jeffersons on like cable, just rebroadcast, it's as presented. It's not like it's something that they went back and edited, which I know has happened. And I gotta tell you, Sejohn, you talk about like that's a decision on the bigger part of the company. I'm sitting here right now, like, should I have said it? Should I have used the word because of what the optics are on it?
Right.
And it's just one of those things where like that's, I mean, there's the power of that word, right? I don't like to give words power. I think that is my favorite part in the Harry Potter books, where he's like, why don't you use Voldemort's name? That's stupid to me that you give him so much power as to never say his name. And then I really like that it's revealed that no, because then he can track you if you're using his name. You idiot. Like, we live in a magical world.
Because words actually do have power, lo and behold.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah.
But
yeah.
it is,
well,
like, it's one of those things where it's like, but it just felt, it took the legs out from under what I felt that 90-minute like live experience was supposed to be.
For sure, I can appreciate that for real. Like to have that setup of like this is exactly as it was, and then for that to not come through is a little bit of a kick in the nuts for real. Yeah, I don't know what the right move is. I think we're still at a place in the world where nobody can tell you what the right move would have been for them to make, right? In that moment. Yeah. And so they had to go by the only real hard evidence they had, which is if we let this word be said on live television, somebody's going to take money away from us. Which is like let's not like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That was definitely the thought process behind that. Like at the end of the day, whether or not we're right or wrong in using this word, what's really going to matter to us is that at the end of our bottom line may be affected if this word gets blared out on our screen, on our television show.
Right.
Like for real.
Yeah, and it scares me that like the dollar is what dictates that and not society. Like it was so I had trouble going to sleep that night because watching that and being like, so is it better than it was back then? That like we've given that word such power that it cannot even be said, even in context of please be aware that there's going to be some language in this that might offend.
Yeah, I think of it like dealing with this sort of thing is like a camel ends up being a horse built by committee, right? Like there clearly was a conversation. Like, do we change the line? Well, no, we can't change the line because anybody that goes back and looks at what the line used to be and compares it will call us out on that. So we can't change the line. All right, but if we can't change the line, you're definitely not going to be able to say this on TV. And it becomes this discussion of a group of people. And clearly the group decision comes to a compromise of say it, but we're going to make sure that it gets bleeped on television.
Right. And you mentioned that you have it in your Hulu queue. I've checked there. It's also edited there.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
And that's
Hulu
not
often has the
surprising.
edited. Well, and we should point out that Hulu often has the edited version of things because they depend on television broadcast versions of
Hmm.
shows, whereas Netflix has usually original copies. So you'll often find edited versions on Hulu that actually on Netflix you won't find the edited version. Sometimes Netflix will have the edited version because that's honestly the only version that exists anymore. But Hulu will always have the TV broadcast version, which is why often when you're watching shows on Hulu, you see the little TV broadcast symbol down in the corner.
Right. Which is weird when you're watching Cheers or Frasier because it's CBS down there, and
Hmm.
those were on NBC. But I guess CBS owns them from a production standpoint. Doesn't matter. But it is. It was just one of those things that, okay. This already kind of felt like you were mocking what TV was back then. And then they did that. Also, you say that the live studio audience was there. That live studio audience cannot have enjoyed watching that at all. Because they had that camera where, like, it pulled out to show exactly what was on stage. And it was just, it's a multicam setup. So it's mostly like cameras and lights. And it's like, so they're in the audience, but they're watching a monitor. They're not actually getting to see it like
I
theater.
mean, you say that, but that's how in front of a live studio audience shows have
have been
always
done.
been
Yes, I
done.
understand that.
Like
Yes.
look at something like SNL where they basically spin the audience for an hour and a half.
Yeah. No, I know. It's just like, like it felt weird. The whole thing felt weird. And also you say that it's in front of that studio audience and they get to say it, but because of the nature of the beep, you don't get to hear the audience reaction to it either. Because it was so long that you didn't hear how the audience reacted to it.
Hmm.
It was just odd all over. And yeah, I feel real self-conscious right now, and I'm Devin Decker. I'm gonna say that, like, and I didn't think, like, I try not to use that word on this show specifically, for the reason, like, this is, I guess, how I would feel if I did, and I think that it's a word that should be used. I think that part of the power it has is the fact that we haven't tried to normalize it, but that's me, and that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, I mean, and we've talked about it in the past. The idea of the power of words, and specifically a word like that like we as two 30-year-old white dudes like don't have any real like right to even debate the like concept of it, right? Like, I mean, it's a thing that is out there in the universe, and the fact that it is something that gets addressed head on in an event like this, and somebody makes a hard and fast decision, there's inevitably going to be people that disagree with that decision, and like you have every right to disagree with it as a human, but right, like where do we stand now in 2019 with that word versus then? It's a glaring thing that they shine a light on, and in some ways I almost think that like kudos for them for that, like I can only the only thing that I can think is the only thing worse would have been them just not would have been
Would have
removing
been
that word entirely.
modifying it, right? So
Right,
that
yeah,
doesn't happen.
and they
Yeah.
didn't do that. So like coming from that standpoint, because I've seen that, as somebody that as a student of theater, as somebody out there in the world that has like seen these kinds of things done before, right? I've been to live readings of
Yep.
episodes and shit like that. Like seeing shit get modified for the sake of the audience's like sensibilities is never satisfying. I don't know how I'd feel about this particular one.
Yeah. No, I do. So I'm gonna try to bring it back in these last 12 minutes. I'm gonna try to get back to happy because I didn't realize how upset I was by that. How disappointed it made me because I watched it and then was like, oh, I get to talk about Brendan Fraser. I get to talk about Doom Patrol, which was so much fun to watch. And also, it's also weird that it was Jamie Foxx, considering something like Django Unchained. I'm just gonna say that,
Hmm.
and then just move forward from there. I'm sorry. Okay, so we have a Discord server that we all talk in and we do production stuff in, right? Like huge air quotes around production stuff in. But
Yeah, for sure.
but I sent something to it this morning. Hava Nagila, consider me converted. And no, I'm not Jewish now. I'm still like Polandarian. I guess if I had to identify my religion, it'd be the religion I made up my senior year of high school, so I could wear a hat inside. That did not work. It didn't work because a teacher told me to take off my hat. I said I can't or I'll burn in hell. He heard me say to him, "Go burn in hell," and then I got pulled down to the principal's office for telling a teacher to go burn in hell about my hat. Also, I didn't take my hat off because I had religious obligations to it, albeit a religion that I had made myself into hallways.
Oh,
But
God.
yes, but no, I had 100
The episode
people.
where Devin damns us all.
Well, I mean, I think I'm damning myself, right? I don't think, is it blasphemous to interact with somebody who is blasphemous?
I mean, at this point, you're asking me some questions about my personal beliefs that I can't even begin to explain.
Okay, and again, it's just like, that's just a thing. But I am a convert on something big, like huge, regarding my life, right? I talked about how television is my religion, is my family's religion. And I have long held, even on this show, that Cheers is a better show than Frasier, and that there is no way that it's the same Frasier Crane.
Mm-hmm.
I have said this many, many times.
Mm-hmm.
But then, this May, I decided to put my money where my mouth is. So after finishing a full, complete viewing of Cheers for the third time in my life, I decided I need to watch Frasier. So I am 17 episodes. No, I watched 19 episodes of season 2 of Frasier. So I've watched the entire first season, and I'm 19 episodes deep into season 2 of Frasier.
Yep.
And I amend that belief. In no uncertain terms. Like, oh my God, what a stupid thing to say. What a just close-minded way to look at those two shows as not being able to exist in the same universe. I am sorry for that, but it makes sense. Like, I understand how I got there. And how I got there was my memories of the show Frasier all come from the later seasons in the show.
Yeah.
Where he has become stuffier and very different from the Frasier that we meet in Boston in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
But that first season, it is very clear that he left Boston because of his divorce from Lilith, which is a big part of season 11, and then went back to Seattle, which is where he grew up. And so much of that first season is him. I cultivated a person who Frasier Crane was when I was in Boston, when I was attending Harvard. And it's him having to, like, look his past in the face and admit that there are some things he wants to embrace.
Right.
And a lot of people, even I personally cite season 2, episode 16, the one where Sam comes to visit, and they, like, address head on that Frasier talked a bunch about how his dad was dead and a scientist, where we have seen for, I'm going to say, 35 episodes prior to that, the fact that, no, Martin is alive and Martin was a cop his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
But they deal with it head on, and it totally works within both universes. that him and Martin, in the first episode of Frasier, where his dad comes to live with him, they have not spoken for 20 years. Like, it is established that Frasier, after his mother died and he went to Harvard, basically said, I am not from Seattle. I am never going to live in that ever again.
Right.
So, of course, it's just easier if you're in a bar with people who, there's also some level in Cheers where he's kind of being guarded and not always being himself while he's there. Like, very honestly, Frasier is in Cheers specifically because him and Sam are friends. And he builds a relationship with other people there, but watching the episode, the one where Sam comes to visit, they have a real friendship, and that real friendship is what kept Frasier coming into Cheers every night, was that he wanted to see his friend Sam.
For sure, yeah.
So it's not one of those things. And the other cited episode is when his father invites him to come out to his bar, Duke's. And he's like, why didn't you ever invite me before? And he goes, I always thought you'd kind of scoff at the idea. And Frasier goes, I probably would have. Like, but people cite that as it like, why would you scoff at the idea? You spent, 9 years of your life hanging out at Cheers, which is arguably a sports bar. It's like, but it's different when it's his choice to go there because his friend owns and operates it, as to his father, who he does not get along with, inviting him to go to his bar with him. Like, it's such a thing. And then,
well, in a weird way, the bar Cheers is a small way for him to stay connected with his past life.
Yeah,
like he gets to be something new and different in Boston, but there's some part of him that still misses that old life, and this is a place where he can do that. He can connect with his old life and still not wallow in it.
Right. It's crazy. Like, it's this crazy depth that I didn't expect. Because a lot of my ideas from Frasier were people who said that they had watched both of them, and that's what their thesis had come to. I never took the time to really develop my own opinion on it by going there and watching the material. But everything that I remembered from Frasier, yeah, he doesn't act the way that he was acting while he was at Cheers. But again, I'm remembering stuff from like the 9th season of Frasier. And if he was still acting in his 50s the way he was acting in his 30s, I'd feel bad for the guy. I'd talk about arrested development and stuff.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where like, no, of course he grows and changes by having his father living with him.
Well, and it's also the nature of television in the 80s and 90s versus now. We don't have, back then we didn't have Hulu or Netflix to fall back on for old seasons. We didn't have the ability to remind ourselves of what he used to be like. We're only living in whatever episodes we have currently in front of us coming on this week / maybe something we videotaped along the way. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
We didn't have the ability to really go back and study character development so much as we just kind of had to assume. I mean, for a lot of people, they maybe didn't watch the first 3 seasons of Frasier. Maybe they didn't come in till season 4 or 5 when he is starting to turn into the more pompous ass that we know at the end of Frasier.
Yeah, I mean it's so good. Like, there's an episode in the first season where Lilith comes to visit Seattle, and it felt like an episode of Cheers. Like, the pacing, the comedy, it felt like an episode of Cheers. And then, and this is what made me send Hava Nagila, I'm converted, is the 8th episode of Frasier season 2 is a 2-parter called Adventures in Paradise, where he starts dating a new woman, and it's his first real serious relationship in the wake of Lilith. And they go away to a resort in Bora Bora that he used to take Lilith to, and Lilith is there with her new boyfriend. And it's great. It's just like this moment where it's like, that's such a Cheers joke. That has happened with like Sam. And it just worked on a level. But then what really got me to say, I am a convert, I am sorry that I was ever mean to Frasier in any way, shape, or form, is that the very end of that episode, him and his girlfriend decide to go back to Bora Bora to give it another shot. And Diane is there. And then he wakes up out of a start, and it turns out that it was just a nightmare that he was having. But the fact that they did it, like they like basically replay the whole thing where he finds Lilith, and I'm like, oh my god, if freaking Shelley Long shows up, this is gonna be incredible. And the reason why that was incredible for me is not because of the 40 some odd episodes of Frasier I've been watching. It's because of the 200 episodes of Cheers I had previously watched.
Yeah.
So it's not a huge departure from who he was.
For sure.
And I want to apologize for crowing so long and so loud about it being that. And I'd like to say to those people who watch Cheers but say I can't watch Frasier because he's not the same character, give it another shot. I don't doubt that there's going to be, from the beginning, I don't doubt that there's going to be a moment where maybe he changes, but also that happens with a bunch of television shows just because of the nature of TV. Look at The West Wing, and when Aaron Sorkin walked away from the show, how much it changed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and like you were saying, it also would be super weird if the character that you were watching 20 years later was behaving and acting in all of the predictable ways that he was 20 years ago. That's not interesting, fun, or real.
Like, if anything, it's cool to watch how having his father back in his life softens him, but also in some ways makes him act more childish again, because he has a parental figure there to critique his every action in a way that he hasn't had before.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's cool. Like, I have enjoyed it immensely from a psychological level. What I have not enjoyed is I can't shake the feeling that I have a Frasier Martin relationship with my father.
And not just because of your dad's affinity for his lounging lazy boy.
No, not just because of my like that's the thing that started it, but then also the fact that I'm currently at a microphone with headphones on and I'm listening. So if you have anything that you'd like to say to me, you can find me on Twitter at Devon D. Decker.
Man, and if you want to discuss some more stuff that we maybe missed over the month, don't forget to hit me up at Siege versus the World.
Yes, I mean, we tried to do this quick, hard, and fast. This was a big month to try to catch up on, and I feel like we've missed it, but you know what? There's always another episode next week. We're going to have other stuff to talk about. Maybe my actual thesis about Rocket Man versus Bohemian Rhapsody. Maybe I won't get sidetracked by All in the Family. Who knows? So until next time, let's throw it over to our own Chopper Dave, the birthday boy, Will, for station identification.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.